Welcome to another Lorcana University gameplay video. Today we're going to be showing off two decks that some of our local players in our friends group have built, including a Emerald Steel mid-range deck versus a Emerald Ruby Evasive deck. The mid-range is going to be piloted by Brad, who designed this deck a little while back, actually one of the first decks he built, and I think it's been getting a little bit of popularity. Similar builds have been getting popularity, showing up in a few tournament top 8s. On the left is Jimmy playing a Emerald Ruby Evasive list, which is basically a budget evolution over the starter, the Emerald Ruby starter. So he, having bought one of those starters, said, okay, well, what was the least amount of money I can invest to try and make this thing competitive? So I think it does have like Kuzcos and that kind of thing in there, but for the most part, it's where he would take that Emerald Ruby list after he finished our pre-con league, where he played with the starter deck for the most of the league. So we'll see how these two decks face off against each other. Jimmy won the play and started off with a Sergeant Tibbs, and Brad responds with a Captain Hook. Not as great against Tibbs, can't really quest in front of the Tibbs, but I'm sure Brad, as most Steel players in the early game, are just looking to trade that Hook in for a banish as early as possible. And Jimmy probably sees that, so he goes ahead and fires off a LeFou to ready up that Tibbs after questing to make sure that Brad has no ability to banish. And of course, Brad is not going to use Hook to quest because it'll end up being banished before it can banish. So he's going to hold it back there. Follows up with a Prince Eric, so pretty strong, pretty standard Steel first 2-turn plays. And Jimmy goes ahead and quests for 2, which means he's willing to trade in, but I think he's going to fire off, he's going to fire off a Mother Knows Best to bounce that Prince Eric back to Brad's hand. So Jimmy's really focusing on the early game, on trying to get as much lore out of these two characters as he can, using some of that removal. Brad's going to replay that Eric and then also fire the cannons. So he uses fire the cannons to eliminate one, and then Captain Hook, he finally gets to trade Captain Hook in to eliminate the other. So Jimmy is going to end up using another Mother Knows Best to bounce Eric again, so kind of wiping the first 2 or 3 turns of the game off the board, which unfortunately is starting to edge into where Brad's deck starts to shine, which is he's going to play a Hans 13th in line. But Jimmy has been biding his time so that he can get to his Kuzco, which of course is really good against any kind of chosen-based removal. So Hans's triggered ability cannot target that Kuzco, which is good for Jimmy. But Brad follows it up with a Mad Hatter, so also able to... Oh, and then Jimmy follows up his Kuzco with a second Kuzco. So now it's a race, and we're starting to get into where Emerald shines best. It's all those 5-drop characters that can quest for 3. So Brad is going to have to try and deal with that Kuzco, going to have to challenge it since he can't choose it with a removal spell, and he's going to use a Grab Your Sword, which does hit Kuzcos, even with Ward, because Grab Your Sword does not choose, it just damages all. It's able to damage and finish off that hurt Kuzco. So down to 1 Kuzco, Jimmy's going to keep questing here and play also his own Mad Hatter, so just flooding out with lots of high lore production characters against Brad. But Brad still has a removal-centric deck, so we'll see if he can pull something off here. And he does. He ends up firing a Smash at the Mad Hatter and then questing with the Hans 13th in line, which does 1 extra damage to finish off that Mad Hatter. So all of that interaction is just really stifling Jimmy's play and keeping him in check when he would have run away with so much lore production. I mean, a lot of his characters aren't even getting a chance to quest before they're eliminated, and that's the strength of playing hard removal over just challenging. Jimmy does draw into a Dragonfire and blows up that Mad Hatter, leaving Brad with 4 lore production versus Jimmy's 3. That Hans is just always such a value generator. Oh, following up, now comes down another Emerald Hans, so Brad has both Hanses. I guess he's a fan of Hans. So he has the 13th in line, and as well as the Scheming Prince, so can produce up to 7 lore. So has kind of a lethal amount of lore, which is going to force Jimmy out of his safety zone. He's going to have to challenge here in order to prevent Brad from winning next turn. Not ideal for a Kuzco. Ends up losing his Kuzco in that trade, and then playing another Kuzco. Don't see a way he's going to get out of this one, other than the classic Be Prepared. Brad is going to quest up to 19 and play a 3rd character, making it basically impossible for Jimmy to win. He'd have to eliminate all 3 of those characters in order to not lose the game. So I think Jimmy's gonna scoop him up. And that's enough. That's it for game 1. So stay tuned for game number 2 in this constructed matchup. And for more Lorcana content, like and follow Lorcana University.